They sprinted for their ships, hightailing it back to the safety of space. Lieutenant Jones watched through his rifle scope as the once arrogant alien warriors fled in complete disarray, shocked and demoralized by the ferocity of human resistance. Just moments ago, the Unas invasion force had descended on Arcturus 6, a human colony world on the fringes of explored space. Their warships darkened the skies, disgorging hordes of reptilian shock troops, each armed to the teeth with advanced weapons. The aliens clearly expected the human settlers to immediately surrender in the face of such overwhelming force. But they didn't know humans. They didn't know the depths of raw grit, determination, and sheer fighting spirit possessed by Lieutenant Jason Jones and his platoon of Terran Marines. Outnumbered 10-1, outgunned by superior Unas technology, the human defenders nonetheless stood their ground without flinching. When the first wave of snarling alien warriors charged the human lines, they were met with a wall of withering pulse rifle fire. Marine armor, while less advanced than Unas gear, proved more than sufficient against the aliens' weapons. Jones and his soldiers moved with fluid precision, applying every hard-earned lesson from their training in a seamless dance of death. Scores of Unas fell as the humans refused to give an inch of ground. From his flagship in orbit, Warlord Merrick watched in disbelief as his warriors broke against the human defenders like waves shattering on unyielding rock. He ordered more troops down, certain that human endurance must have a breaking point, but it never came. Jones and his Marines fought with a tenacity the Unas could scarcely comprehend, holding their positions for hours until Merrick was finally forced to accept the unthinkable. He signaled the retreat, leaving Arcturus 6 unconquered. As the Unas ships slunk back to the stars, Lieutenant Jones and his battered platoon remained standing tall amongst piles of alien dead. Against all odds, the human spirit had triumphed. The repercussions would echo across the galaxy. As the Unas ships fled the Arcturus 6 system, a stunned silence fell over the devastated battlefield. Lieutenant Jones and his Marines, battered but unbroken, looked to the skies with a mixture of relief and disbelief. In a seemingly impossible way, they had held the line, repelling an enemy that had seemed invincible mere hours before. But even as the human defenders savored their hard-fought victory, the Terran Alliance was already moving to capitalize on the unexpected turn of events. In a secure conference room on Earth, Ambassador Derek Thompson received his orders to travel to the Unas homeworld of Zarnak and open a dialogue with the very beings who had so recently sought to conquer humanity. The journey to Zarnak was tense, the human diplomatic ship flanked by a heavily armed Unas escort fleet. As they approached the planet, Thompson couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the Unas capital city, a sprawling metropolis of towering spires and vast interconnected domes. The human delegation was quickly ushered into the presence of the Unas High Council, where Warlord Merrick, the architect of the failed invasion, sat alongside his fellow leaders. Thompson steeled himself, expecting a tense and hostile reception, but the Unas surprised him once again. "Ambassador Thompson," the High Counselor began, his voice a guttural rumble, "we have invited you here not as enemies, but as potential allies." Thompson frowned, confusion etched on his features. "Allies? After your unprovoked attack on our colony?" Merrick leaned forward, his reptilian eyes gleaming. "The assault on Arcturus 6 was a test, human, a test of your strength, your perseverance. We had to know if you were worthy partners in the battle to come." As the Unas leaders revealed the true scope of the threat posed by the Orcs Dominion, Thompson felt a growing sense of unease. The Unas, it seemed, were not the greatest danger facing humanity after all. Back on Earth, news of the proposed alliance with the Unas sent shockwaves through the Terran Alliance. Some saw it as a necessary evil, a chance to forge a united front against a common foe. Others, scarred by decades of conflict and mistrust, argued vehemently against any partnership with the reptilian warriors. Amidst the swirling debate, Lieutenant Jones and his platoon received new orders to join a joint human-Unas task force charged with gathering vital intelligence on the Orcs threat. As they prepared for the mission, Jones couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this point. Just days ago, he had been locked in mortal combat with the Unas, fighting for the very survival of his species. Now he would be fighting alongside them, bound together by the shared knowledge that failure could mean the end of everything they held dear. As the task force ship slipped into the void, Jones knew that the true test of the alliance was yet to come. In the face of an implacable enemy, could humans and Unas truly learn to trust one another? The fate of both species hung in the balance. The joint human-Unas task force ship cut silently through the void, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible to long-range sensors. In the cramped quarters of the vessel, Lieutenant Jason Jones studied the mission briefing one last time, his eyes scanning the details of Operation Shadowblade. Nervous human? The gravelly voice belonged to Krog, the Unas warrior assigned as Jones's partner for the operation. The reptilian alien scales glinted dully in the low light of the ship's interior. Jones met Krog's gaze steadily. "Focused," he replied. "We've got a job to do." As they approached the outer reaches of Orcs-controlled space, the tension aboard the ship ratcheted up. The task force split into smaller teams, each with its own infiltration objective. Jones and Krog's unit was tasked with gathering intelligence on a suspected Orcs military installation. Their dropship touched down silently on the outskirts of a sprawling industrial complex. As they moved through the shadows, the true scale of the Orcs operation became clear. Massive shipyards stretched as far as the eye could see, with countless vessels in various stages of construction. "By the spirits," Krog breathed, his normally impassive face showing a flicker of concern. "Their fleet, it's beyond anything we imagined." Jones nodded grimly, tapping a command into his wrist-mounted computer to begin recording visual data. They pressed on, weaving through the labyrinth of structures and machinery. As they rounded a corner, Jones held up a hand, signaling for Krog to stop. Ahead, a group of emaciated aliens shuffled past, escorted by heavily armed Orcs guards. The prisoners' hollow eyes and broken postures told a story of brutal subjugation. "Slave labor," Jones whispered, his jaw clenching. "They're using conquered species to build their war machine." Krog's scaled hand tightened on his weapon. "We must gather more evidence. The High Council needs to see this." They pushed deeper into the complex, documenting everything they encountered. But as they approached a heavily guarded research facility, their luck ran out. An alarm klaxon shattered the relative quiet, and shouts echoed through the corridors. "We've been made," Jones hissed, already moving. "Time to go." They sprinted through the facility, Orcs plasma bolts sizzling past them. As they neared the exit, a massive blast door began to descend. Without breaking stride, Krog scooped up Jones and hurled him through the narrowing gap. The Unas warrior then dropped and slid beneath the door, clearing it by mere centimeters. Back aboard their ship, as they hurtled away from the Orcs world, Jones and Krog pored over the data they'd managed to steal. What they found chilled them to the core. "A planet killer," Jones murmured, staring at the schematics of a colossal weapon. "If they complete this—" Krog nodded solemnly. "Then no world will be safe. We must warn our leaders." As the task force regrouped and set course for Allied space, Jones couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of the Orcs threat. The real challenge, he knew, lay ahead, not just in facing the Dominion, but in keeping the fragile human-Unas alliance from fracturing under the weight of mistrust and competing agendas. With a weary sigh, he began composing his report. The Terran alliance needed to know everything they'd discovered, and time was running short. The return journey to Allied space was tense, the task force ship's corridors filled with hushed conversations and worried glances. Lieutenant Jones spent hours poring over the intelligence they'd gathered, his mind racing with the implications of the Orcs planet killer. As they docked at Terran Alliance headquarters, Jones was immediately whisked away to a high-level briefing. The room buzzed with a mix of human and Unas officials, their faces grim as they absorbed the details of the Orcs threat. "This changes everything," Admiral Chen declared, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "We need to accelerate our defensive preparations." Across the table, General Zortok of the Unas military leaned forward, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights. "Defenses alone will not suffice. We must strike first, crush these Orcs vermin before they can unleash their weapon." The room erupted into heated debate, with human and UNA's representatives arguing strategy and ethics. Jones watched silently, noting the growing divide between those advocating for caution and those pushing for immediate aggressive action. After hours of tense negotiations, a compromise was reached. Ambassador Thompson stood, addressing the assembled leaders. "We will combine our strengths. The Terran Alliance will share our terraforming technology, while the UNAs provide their advanced propulsion and weapon systems. Together, we'll build a fleet capable of challenging the Orcs." The next weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jones found himself assigned to a massive shipyard, overseeing the integration of human and UNA's tech into a new class of warship. He worked alongside Krog, the two of them bridging the gap between their species' engineers. "Never thought I'd see the day," Krog rumbled, watching a human technician calibrate a UNA's plasma cannon. "Our peoples working together like this." Jones nodded, his eyes on the sleek hull of the ship taking shape before them. Necessity makes for strange bedfellows. As the fleet neared completion, Jones and his platoon were tapped for a new assignment. They joined Krog and other elite UNA's warriors in a grueling training program, learning to fight as a unified force. The training pushed them to their limits. Human agility and adaptability meshed with UNA's strength and endurance, creating a formidable combat unit. Jones found himself gaining a newfound respect for his reptilian counterparts, even as he nursed bruises from their sparring sessions. Just as the Allied fleet reached operational status, long-range sensors detected a massive Orcs armada on a direct course for the outer colonies. The mood in the war room was grim as Admiral Chen laid out their options. "We can't let them reach civilian populations," she said, her voice steel. "We have to intercept them now, before they can use that planet killer." General Zortak nodded in agreement. A preemptive strike, bold but necessary. Within hours, the Allied fleet was mobilized. Jones stood on the bridge of the Terran flagship Avenger, watching as hundreds of ships fell into formation. Beside them loomed the massive UNA's dreadnought, Kraken, its weapons gleaming. As they entered faster-than-light travel, Jones felt the weight of what lay ahead. They were about to engage in the largest space battle in known history against an enemy that threatened the very existence of both their species. The fleet dropped out of FTL in the Kilrin system, immediately confronted by the vast Orcs armada. For a moment, silence reigned as the two forces sized each other up. Then space erupted into chaos. Energy beams lanced between ships, missiles streaked across the void, and fighters swarmed in intricate dogfights. The Allied vessels fought valiantly, their new integrated technology allowing them to hold their own against the numerically superior Orcs. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that they were slowly being overwhelmed. Jones watched grimly as Allied ships winked out of existence, overwhelmed by the relentless Orcs assault. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the comms. "We need to change the equation. Lieutenant Jones, assemble your team. You're going to board and disable the Orcs flagship." Jones exchanged a look with Krog, who had joined him on the bridge. The UNA's warrior bared his teeth in a fierce grin. "Ready for one last adventure, human?" As they raced to the dropship bay, Jones allowed himself a grim smile. The odds were stacked against them, but if they could pull this off, they might just turn the tide of the entire war. The dropship launched into the chaos of battle, weaving between destroyed ships and weapons fire as it hurtled towards the massive Orcs flagship. Jones gripped his rifle tightly, preparing for the fight of his life. As the dropship hurtled through the chaos of battle, Jones braced himself against the bulkhead, his eyes scanning the faces of his team. Human and UNA's warriors stood side by side, united in purpose despite their differences. The dropship shuddered as it dodged incoming fire, weaving between the burning husks of destroyed ships. Through the viewport, Jones caught glimpses of the massive Orcs flagship looming ever closer, its hull jam packed with weapon emplacements. 30 seconds to impact, the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Brace for hard landing." With a bone-jarring crash, the dropship slammed into the Orcs vessel's hull. Emergency hatches blew open, and Jones led the charge into the alien corridors. The air was thick with acrid smoke and the scent of ozone as weapons fire erupted around them. Push forward, Jones shouted, his rifle spitting plasma bolts at the Orcs defenders. Beside him, Krog's massive form barreled through the enemy lines, his strength and ferocity clearing a path for the Allied team. They fought their way deeper into the ship, the maze-like passages echoing with the sounds of battle. Jones's HUD flashed with updates, guiding them towards the central power core. Time was running out. As they approached the core, they encountered heavier resistance. Orcs troops poured fire into the narrow corridor, pinning down the Allied team. Jones watched in horror as several of his soldiers fell, their bodies smoking from energy weapon hits. "We're running out of time," Krog growled, his scales singed and bleeding. "The core is just beyond that sealed bulkhead." Jones nodded grimly. "We need to get those explosives planted, or this whole mission was for nothing." Krog's eyes gleamed with fierce commitment. "I'll get you through." Before Jones could protest, the Unas warrior charged forward, using his massive body as a living shield. Energy bolts sizzled against Krog's scales as he reached the bulkhead controls. With a roar of pain and defiance, he smashed the panel, overriding the door's security. As it slid open, Krog stumbled back, his body riddled with wounds. "Go," he rasped, collapsing against the wall. "Finish this." Jones hesitated for a split second, then steeled himself and led the remaining team members into the core. They worked quickly, planting explosive charges around the pulsing energy matrix. Just as they finished, alarms blared throughout the ship. Jones's comm crackled to life, filled with urgent chatter. He caught fragments about reactor overloads and evacuation orders. "Something's wrong," he muttered, turning to his team. "We need to get out of here now." They raced back through the corridors, carrying their wounded. As they reached the extraction point, Jones saw a Una's dropship waiting instead of their own. Confusion turned to relief as he recognized Merrick, the Unas warlord, at the controls. "Hurry, humans," Merrick called out. "This ship is about to become a very large explosion." As they piled into the dropship, Jones caught a glimpse of the Orcs flagship's hull beginning to buckle. The vessel accelerated away, weaving through the debris-filled battlefield. Behind them, the Orcs flagship erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave buffeted their small craft, but Merrick's skilled piloting kept them intact. As they approached the Terran flagship Avenger, Jones's mind raced. They had succeeded in their mission, but at a terrible cost. And why had Merrick come to their rescue? The complexities of the human-Unas alliance were far from dedication, and he sensed that the battles ahead would not be fought only against the Orcs. The dropship docked with the Avenger, and as the hatch opened, Jones saw Admiral Chen waiting, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. He knew that the aftermath of this victory would bring challenges as great as the battle itself. The aftermath of the battle left the Allied fleet battered but victorious. As Jones stepped off the dropship onto the deck of the Avenger, Admiral Chen's expression softened. "We did it, Captain," she said, emphasizing his new rank. "But this is just the beginning." In the weeks that followed, Jones found himself reassigned to Zeta Prime, a frontier world now host to a joint human-Unas military installation. The base buzzed with activity as personnel from both species worked to integrate their technologies and tactics. Jones's platoon, now a shadow of its former self, was merged with a contingent of Unas warriors led by Commander Grask. The scarred veteran's presence was a constant reminder of the sacrifices made during the Orcs assault. "Your people fight with surprising tenacity," Grask rumbled as they inspected the base's perimeter defenses. "Perhaps there is hope for this alliance after all." Jones nodded, watching a human technician calibrate a Unas plasma cannon. "We're stronger together than apart. Let's hope our leaders see it that way too." As if in answer to his concerns, news arrived of diplomatic talks on Earth. The negotiations were tense, with centuries of mistrust threatening to derail the process. Jones and his team watched the broadcast with breathless expectation, knowing their future hung in the balance. Finally, after weeks of debate, the Terra Unas Defense Pact was signed. Cheers erupted throughout the base, humans and Unas alike celebrating this historic moment. The pact brought more than just military cooperation. On the barren moon of Krios 4, Jones witnessed the fruits of their shared knowledge firsthand. Human terraforming equipment worked in tandem with Una's atmospheric processors, slowly transforming the lifeless rock into a habitable world. Dr. Alara Venn, the lead human scientist, wiped sweat from her brow as she explained the process. "It's incredible," she said, gesturing to the dome-covered valley below. "In a few years, this entire moon could support life from both our worlds." The Una scientist beside her, Zal Thrak, nodded in agreement. "Our peoples have much to learn from one another. This is but the first step." But even as progress was made, tensions simmered beneath the surface. News of General Zortak's trial on Zarnak reached Zeta Prime, sparking heated debates among the troops. Jones found himself mediating disputes between human and Una soldiers, each side viewing the trial through their own lens of suspicion. The unexpected leniency shown by Admiral Williams only added fuel to the fire. Jones spent long hours in the base's combat simulator, pushing his mixed-species squad to work as one, hoping to forge bonds that could withstand the political tremors. Their training was cut short by an urgent transmission from Allied command. Long-range probes had detected Orcs activity in an unexplored region of space. More troubling were the reports of massive spatial distortions in the area, hinting at a power beyond their comprehension. Jones stood at attention as Admiral Williams addressed the assembled strike team. "We don't know what the Orcs are after," she said, her holographic image flickering slightly. "But we can't let them harness whatever's out there. Your mission is to infiltrate, gather intelligence, and if possible, deny the enemy access to this anomaly." As the briefing concluded, Jones turned to find Commander Grask already gearing up. The Una's warrior's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Ready for another adventure, human?" Grask asked, echoing Krog's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. Jones checked his weapon, a hybrid of human and Una's tech. "Let's go make history," he replied, leading his team toward the waiting dropship and the unknown that lay beyond. The dropship tore through the void, its hull vibrating as it pushed beyond safe velocities. Inside, Captain Jones gripped the harness tightly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Beside him, Commander Grask's scales rippled with anticipation. "Approaching target zone," the pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Prepare for stealth insertion." Jones nodded to his team, a mix of human special forces and Una's warriors. They had trained relentlessly for this moment, honing their skills in countless simulations. Now, they would face the real thing. The dropship's engines cut out, inertia carrying them towards a massive structure looming against the backdrop of stars. The Orcs outpost hung in orbit around a swirling vortex of darkness, a rogue black hole that pulsed with unnatural energy. "By the ancestors," Grask rumbled, his eyes wide. "What abomination have they created?" Before Jones could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as the pilot fought to maintain control. "Spatial distortions," he shouted. "We're being pulled off course." Jones felt his stomach lurch as reality seemed to twist around them. The black hole's influence reached out, threatening to tear their craft apart. "Shields at maximum," Jones ordered. "Everyone brace for impact." The dropship slammed into the outpost's outer hull, skidding across its surface before grinding to a halt. Emergency systems kicked in, sealing breaches and stabilizing internal pressure. "Move out!" Jones barked, leading the charge through the emergency hatch. They emerged onto the station's exterior, mag boots engaging to keep them anchored. The team spread out, weapons at the ready. In the distance, Jones saw Orcs guards converging on their position. "Hostiles incoming," he warned, diving behind a protruding conduit as energy bolts sizzled past. The battle erupted in earnest, the vacuum of space eerily silent, as beams of deadly light crisscrossed between the two forces. Jones watched as a human soldier, Private Chen, was struck full in the chest. Her body drifted away, tumbling end over end into the abyss. Grask roared in defiance, his massive frame providing cover as he laid down suppressing fire. "We must reach the central hub," he shouted over the comm. Jones nodded, signaling to the rest of the team. They leapfrogged forward, using the station's uneven surface as cover. As they neared an airlock, Jones noticed strange symbols etched into the metal, definitely not Orcs in origin. The inner door cycled open, and they pushed inside. Artificial gravity took hold as they entered a long corridor bathed in an eerie purple light. Jones felt a chill run down his spine as he took in their surroundings. The architecture was unlike anything he'd seen before. All curves and impossible angles that seemed to defy geometry itself. "This isn't Orcs tech," he muttered, running a hand along a wall that felt both solid and somehow intangible. "Agreed," Grask replied, his nostrils flaring. "There's a scent here, ancient and wrong." They pressed deeper into the station, encountering sporadic resistance. The Orcs they faced seemed different somehow, more frenzied and disorganized than usual. It was as if their minds were no longer fully their own. As they neared the central hub, the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. Jones felt his thoughts becoming sluggish, reality warping at the edges of his vision. "Stay focused," he ordered, gritting his teeth against the psychic assault. "Whatever's in there, we can't let it—" His words were cut short as they rounded a corner and came face to face with a sight that defied comprehension. In the center of a vast chamber hung a swirling vortex of dark energy, tendrils of void stuff reaching out hungrily. Around it, strange machines pulsed with otherworldly power. But it was the beings operating those machines that froze the blood in Jones's veins. Tall, spindly creatures with too many limbs moved with inhuman grace. Their bodies seemed to shift and change as he looked at them, never quite settling on a single form. "The Renar," Grask whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and revulsion. One of the aliens turned, fixing Jones with eyes that were windows into infinite darkness. He felt his mind turning, teetering on the edge of madness as it tried to process what it was seeing. A klaxon blared, snapping him back to reality. The Renar moved with blinding speed, their limbs blurring as they manipulated complex controls. The vortex in the center of the room began to pulse more rapidly, waves of distortion rippling outward. "They're powering up the weapon," Jones shouted, raising his rifle. "Take them down!" The strike team opened fire, their weapons blazing in the confined space. But the Renar moved with impossible speed, reality itself bending around them as they dodged and weaved. Grask charged forward, his massive form barreling into one of the alien machines. It exploded in a shower of sparks and otherworldly energies. The Renar nearest to him let out a sound that defied description. Part scream, part song, all wrong. Jones felt something wet trickle from his ears as the alien's cry pierced his mind. He staggered, nearly dropping his weapon. Through blurred vision, he saw more Orcs pouring into the chamber, their eyes glazed and unfocused. "Fall back," he ordered, providing covering fire as his team retreated. "We need to regroup and call for backup." As they fought their way back to the airlock, Jones's mind raced. They had discovered far more than they had bargained for. The alliance between the Orcs and these Renar changed everything. And that weapon, if the aliens succeeded in harnessing the black hole's power, no force in the galaxy would be able to stand against them. They sealed the airlock behind them, the sounds of pursuit fading. Jones opened a secure channel to Allied Command, his voice grim as he began his report. "Admiral Williams, this is Captain Jones. We have a serious problem." "Admiral Williams, this is Captain Jones. We have a serious situation here. The Orcs are not alone. They've allied with an unknown species called the Renar. They're constructing some kind of weapon using the black hole's energy. We need immediate backup and—" The transmission cut off as another wave of psychic energy pulsed through the station. Jones stumbled, his vision blurring. Grask caught him, steadying the human captain with a firm grip. "We cannot stay here," the Una's warrior growled. "Our minds will shatter if we remain exposed to their influence." Jones nodded, forcing himself to focus. "Agreed. We need a new plan." Over the next few days, Jones and his team relayed their findings to Allied Command. The revelation of the Orcs-Renar alliance sent shockwaves through the human and Una's leadership. Admiral Williams and Warlord Merrick convened an emergency war council to address this new threat. The solution they devised was audacious and dangerous. While the main Allied fleet would launch a massive assault on a critical Orcs shipyard in the Ryler system, drawing away the bulk of the enemy forces, a smaller strike team would infiltrate and destroy the black hole weapon. Jones found himself back on Zeta Prime, preparing for the most crucial mission of his career. He watched as Dr. Venn made final adjustments to the experimental phase cloak devices they'd salvaged from previous encounters with Renner technology. "These should allow you to bypass their outer defenses," she explained, her face etched with concern. "But we don't know how long they'll hold up once you're inside." Jones nodded grimly. "We'll make it count." The next few hours passed in a blur of final preparations and tense goodbyes. As Jones boarded the stealth transport that would carry them to their target, he felt Grask's presence at his side. "Ready for another adventure, human?" the Unas asked, echoing their now familiar exchange. Jones managed a tight smile. "Let's go make history." The journey to the black hole outpost was tense and silent. Each member of the strike team knew the odds they faced. As they approached their target, reports came in of the Allied fleet engaging Orcs forces at the Ryler shipyards. Their diversion was working. "Phase cloaks active," the pilot announced as they neared the outpost perimeter. "Prepare for insertion." Jones felt a strange tingling sensation as the cloaking field enveloped him. He watched in awe as his body seemed to fade from view, becoming translucent and ghost-like. They passed through the outpost shields as if they weren't there, touching down on a deserted landing pad. As soon as their boots hit the deck, all semblance of stealth vanished. Alarms blared, and Jones saw streams of Orcs troops pouring from nearby airlocks. "Move!" he shouted, leading the charge towards the outpost's interior. What followed was a nightmarish gauntlet of twisted corridors and alien architecture. Jones and his team fought tooth and nail for every meter gained, their weapons blazing against waves of Orcs defenders and the occasional Renner monstrosity. Casualties mounted quickly. Jones watched in horror as soldiers he'd trained with for months fell to enemy fire or worse, their minds shattered by the Renar's psychic assaults. But still, they pressed on. After what felt like hours of grueling combat, they finally reached the central Nexus chamber. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A massive generator pulsed with otherworldly energy, tendrils of dark matter writhing around its core. "Plant the charges," Jones ordered, providing covering fire as demolitions experts rushed forward. Suddenly, a piercing shriek filled the air. Jones turned to see a towering Renar materialize from the shadows, its form shifting and warping as it advanced. Grask roared a challenge, charging to meet the alien head-on. The two titans clashed in a fury of claws, teeth, and impossible geometries. Jones forced himself to look away, focusing on the task at hand. He watched as the last proton torpedo was set in place. "Charges armed!" came the call he'd been waiting for. "Fall back!" Jones shouted. "Everyone out now!" They retreated in a desperate scramble, Grask bringing up the rear. The Unas warrior was covered in wounds that leaked an unsettling mix of blood and shadow stuff. As they raced towards the hangar bay, the outpost began to shake violently. Explosions rocked the structure, and Jones felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as gravity seemed to shift and warp around them. They burst into the hangar just as their evac shuttle touched down. Jones did a quick head count as his team piled aboard. Less than half of those who'd started the mission remained. "Go, go, go!" he urged the pilot as the last stragglers climbed in. The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling them away from the doomed outpost. Through the viewports, Jones watched as a blinding flash engulfed the station. When the light faded, he saw the impossible. A miniature black hole where the outpost had been, hungrily devouring everything in its vicinity. As they sped towards the safety of the Allied fleet, Jones slumped in his seat, exhaustion finally overtaking him. He felt Grask's hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that needed no words. They had destroyed the weapon and dealt the Orcs-Renar alliance a crippling blow, but the cost had been staggering. As the adrenaline faded, Jones found himself wondering what new horrors this war would bring, and how much more they would have to sacrifice before it was over. Over before it was truly won. Jones blinked, his eyes adjusting to the harsh light of the debriefing room. Admiral Williams's hologram flickered before him, the strain evident on her face even through the distorted projection. "The intelligence we've retrieved from the outpost is troubling," she said, her voice tight. The Renar were merely the beginning. Jones felt a chill run down his spine as Williams laid out the true nature of their enemy. The Zargorath, an entity beyond comprehension, poised to consume their reality. The Orcs, once their greatest threat, now revealed as unwitting pawns in a cosmic game. "We've detected spatial anomalies in the Cerberus Nebula," Williams continued. "It's our best lead on the dimensional rift. We're consolidating our forces for a push into uncharted space." "And the colonies?" Jones asked, already dreading the answer. Williams's hologram flickered, her expression grim. "We're leaving minimal defenses. It's a calculated risk, but we have no choice. This is an all-or-nothing play." As the briefing concluded, Jones found Grask waiting outside. The Unis warrior's scales were dull, his posture slumped with exhaustion. "How many?" Jones asked quietly. Grask's eyes met his. "Too many," he rumbled, "but they died with honor, saving countless lives." They walked in silence through the bustling corridors of Zeta Prime's military complex. Everywhere, Jones saw the signs of frantic preparation. Technicians upgrading weapon systems, logistics officers coordinating massive supply chains, fresh-faced recruits marching in formation. "They look so young," Jones murmured, watching a group of human and Unis cadets training together. Grask nodded. "They are the future we fight for." Over the next weeks, Jones threw himself into training the integrated forces. Human agility paired with Una's strength, backed by technology salvaged from their encounters with the Renar. They would need every advantage against what was coming. The call came sooner than expected. Jones was overseeing a combat simulation when alarms blared throughout the base. He sprinted to the command center, Grask hot on his heels. Holograms flickered to life, showing scenes of devastation across multiple systems. Massive, writhing forms tore through planetary defenses seamlessly. Colonies went dark, one by one. Admiral Williams's face appeared, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The Zargorath Vanguard is here. We're initiating Operation Firebreak. Captain Jones, Commander Grask, your teams will lead the defensive actions. Buy us time to reach the rift." Jones met Grask's eyes, seeing his own willpower reflected there. They had trained for this, prepared as best they could. Now it was time to face the storm. Within hours, Jones found himself on the bridge of the assault carrier Defiant, leading a flotilla of fast attack craft. Their mission: strike hard, strike fast, and keep the Zargorath forces off balance. "Multiple hostiles detected in the Arcturus system," the sensor officer reported. "Biosignatures off the charts." Jones studied the tactical display, his mind racing. "Plot an intercept course. We'll hit them before they can establish a foothold." The Defiant shuddered as it tore through subspace, emerging into a scene of horror. Vast, tentacled monstrosities loomed over a devastated colony world. Swarms of smaller creatures filled the space between, defying known laws of physics. "All craft, weapons free," Jones ordered. "Concentrate fire on the largest entities. Let's give these colonists a fighting chance." The battle erupted in a furious exchange of energy weapons in impossible geometries. Jones watched as Grask led boarding parties onto one of the colossal bioconstructs, carving a path of destruction through its innards. For hours they fought with desperate intensity. When their ammunition ran low, they rammed their ships into the enemy. When their shields failed, they used the wreckage of destroyed vessels as cover. As the Defiant shuddered under another impact, Jones received a priority transmission. Admiral Williams's face appeared, lined with exhaustion but filled with fierce pride. "You've done it, Captain," she said. "Your actions have given us the opening we needed. The main fleet is entering the nebula now. Whatever happens next, know that you've given humanity a chance." Jones nodded, allowing himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Then he turned back to the battle raging around them. The war for existence itself had only just begun. Jones gritted his teeth as another impact rocked the Defiant. Klaxons blared, warning of multiple hull breaches. Through the view screen, he watched a Zargorath bioconstruct tear through an Allied cruiser without difficulty. "Sir, we've got incoming!" The tactical officer's voice was strained. Massive energy signature detected in the nebula. A blinding flash erupted from the swirling gases, and Jones felt his heart leap. The main fleet had arrived. Admiral Williams's flagship, the Avenger, led the charge, its massive spinal lance cannon already powering up. Hundreds of human and Una's vessels poured from the nebula's heart, weapons blazing. "All ships, form up!" Williams's voice crackled over the comms. "We're making our push for the rift. Captain Jones, fall back and regroup with the colony defense forces." "Understood, Admiral," Jones replied, even as part of him ached to join the final assault. "Good hunting." As the Defiant limped away from the main battle, Jones received a priority alert from Zeta Prime. The colony was under heavy attack. "Plot a course," he ordered, his voice grim. "Maximum speed." They emerged from hyperspace into chaos. Vast, writhing forms of Zargorath constructs loomed over Zeta Prime's shattered defenses. On the ground, human and Una soldiers fought a desperate holding action. Jones led the charge, his strike team carving a path through waves of smaller bioforms. He caught glimpses of Grask in the thick of the fighting, the Una's commander's massive frame leaving destruction in its wake. A piercing shriek filled the air. Jones looked up to see an immense Zargorath spore launcher, its grotesque maw opening wide. Time seemed to slow as he watched a volley of writhing projectiles arc towards him. Suddenly, Grask was there. The Una's warrior threw himself into the path of the biomunitions, his body shielding Jones from the onslaught. Jones watched in horror as his friend and mentor crumpled to the ground, riddled with squirming parasites. "Grask!" Jones shouted, rushing to the fallen commander's side. But it was too late. Grask's eyes, once filled with warrior's fire, were now glassy and unfocused. With his last breath, the Unas raised his arm in a final salute. Rage and grief threatened to overwhelm Jones, but he forced them down. There would be time to mourn later. For now, the battle raged on. As Jones rallied the defenders for another push, his comm unit crackled to life. Admiral Williams's voice came through, tight with strain. "Captain, the situation at the rift has deteriorated," she said. "We've engaged the Zargorath's main body, but our Unas allies are vulnerable to its psychic attacks. We need every human ship we can muster." Jones looked out over the ravaged landscape of Zeta Prime, torn between duty and the desperate need to protect the colony. "Understood, Admiral," he said finally. "We'll do what we can here and then move to support." As he gave the order to prepare for departure, Jones cast one last glance at Grask's fallen form. He silently vowed that his friend's sacrifice would not be in vain. The Defiant's engines flared to life, propelling them back towards the heart of the nebula. Jones steeled himself for what lay ahead, knowing that the fate of two civilizations, and perhaps reality itself, hung in the balance.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.